Some of you may know me from my shorts channel where I rebind books and give some thoughts on those. But I thought it'd be fun to come on here and try out a long form video. And really, what better place to start than a top 10 list? And these are going to be my top 10 books of 2024 so far. I had tried making a top 10 books of all time, but just, I don't know, I'm indecisive. And trilogies, if I've read them in the entire year, count as one book. So let's get straight into it with number 10. So at number 10 on this list, we've got The Folk of the Air, or the series with the Cruel Prince. This was a great book, great series really. It follows the story of a human girl who is viciously brought into a fairy world, and just sort of her life and growing up in this world where everyone is so different. Everyone judges her, everyone is mean to her, and just her finding her place in this world. Not necessarily a life-changing book, but I thought it was a great story. I really liked the atmosphere, the political intrigue. That was probably my favorite part. I read these back to back to back, and they were just so easy. Definitely recommend checking this out if you haven't, but I'd be surprised if you haven't heard of it. So at number 9 on this list, I've got the first Shakespeare I read this year, and that is Julius Caesar. I really liked this book. Shakespeare has been sort of a hit or miss for me in the past, but this book just has such great lessons. It follows the story of this Roman emperor who gets assassinated by his Senate, and just the outcome of that. It just shows the horrificness of taking matters into your own hands and how far people will go to achieve things that they aren't really even certain about. Julius Caesar is a great book. I definitely feel like it's a good place for beginners to start. I think this might have been my 4th Shakespeare, so I'm not that scholarly, but definitely a great story, very short, you can just fly through this, and very action-packed, so it really was not boring at all. But number 8 on this list, we got a book that really shocked me because I had no idea that this man wrote science fiction. That is Out of the Silent Planet, which is a part of C.S. Lewis's Space trilogy. It just always amazes me to see what C.S. Lewis can do, to write the non-fiction Christian stuff, to then writing Narnia, to then writing allegories, and now apparently science fiction. And he does a great job at it. This story follows a man who is kidnapped and sent to Mars against his will, with 2 very suspicious other scientists. It just has that classic C.S. Lewis world building and storytelling mixed with some important ideas. I can't wait to read the rest. And at number 7 on this list, we've got Tress of the Emerald Sea by Brandon Sanderson. So this is the first of Sanderson's secret projects, and the first that I've read. And yeah, it was just a great time. It's a pirate story, it's a found family story, it's a coming of age story. You can pretty much get anything in this. But the part that really sticks out to a lot of people is the narration style. And I can really see how that can mess people up. It's a very involved narrator, but I don't know, it just grew on me. I really liked how this was put together. I really liked the story, the magic system. It asks a lot of important questions about growing up and basically who are you going to be when you grow up. Definitely well worth it. Definitely check out Tress of the Emerald Sea. And at number 6, we've got really the first book I read this year, and that is Robin Hobb's Assassin's Apprentice. This is an amazing series overall, but the first really stood out to me. I think it's because it's the first fantasy I've read, and so it's really kickstarted my whole fantasy journey. Assassin's Apprentice follows an illegitimate son as he's navigating royal life in this kingdom that really doesn't like him. It's got a great magic system, and really we see that magic system developed in the later books. But yeah, Assassin's Apprentice is just a great story. At number 5, we've got, I think, one of the biggest single books that I've read, and that is Malice by John Gwynne, perhaps? I don't know. This is a part of a larger series called The Faithful and the Fallen. So this series as a whole follows this world that's broken and that's about to experience what he calls this God War. Not sure exactly what that'll entail. It's just a great fantasy read. It's very approachable. The chapters are so short. You follow so many perspectives, and yet you feel attached to every single perspective. This guy is just such a great writer, and I'm excited to read the next installments of the series. I feel like it's a great introduction to high fantasy, but that's also not like scary or intimidating. And at number 4, we've got a book everyone knows, The Fellowship of the Ring by J.R.R. Tolkien. I mean, just such a great story. I haven't finished the series yet, but The Fellowship of the Ring I feel like is going to be one of my favorites. Just the atmosphere of the Shire, the story of how you see things just cascading into worse and worse and worse, and really not wanting it for these characters. A great story. It'll really stick with you. Tolkien's world building is just phenomenal. So at number 3, we've got a book that really blew me away and I was not expecting it. That is The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. This is the classic that follows the story of a man who has this picture painted of himself, and he basically changes places with this picture for eternal youth. It's got these great lessons on selfishness and vanity and pride, and really how these can destroy a person. And it's a classic, but it's also got elements of like fantasy and science fiction with the whole swapping places with the picture. Definitely check this out. Even if you haven't read classics before, I think this would be a great place to start. Maybe a top 10 book of all time for me. It is just powerful and quick, and you know, I'm really noticing that more and more with the short stories. I feel like authors really pack in a lot into those. But off to number 2, and that is The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. I've got this. Plan on using this for a project upcoming, so I'm not opening it yet. This is the prequel to The Hunger Games. It follows the story of President Snow as he's at this critical point in life where he's figuring out who he is and who he'll become. And we see just this great philosophical questions of humanity and what are humans like without government or with government. This is a great story, well worth your time. Especially if you like Hunger Games. I mean, we've got the whole Hunger Games aspect in this as well. It's one of those books that you end and you just have to think about. Just sit there and think about what the author was trying to say, what they might have been saying. Like The Picture of Dorian Gray, this is a corruption arc, because if you know anything about the Hunger Games, you know President Snow becomes this horrible president. I was so happy to see that it wasn't just a sad backstory, but really Suzanne Collins put some thought into this and really had a story to tell, and it was just amazing. So at number 1, we've got one of my favorite series of all time, and that is the Mistborn series. Again, trilogies count as one book here, but if I were to choose one, I'd pick The Hero of Ages. That book is just fascinating. The different characters it follows and the scenarios it follows of really this world ending, and what does that mean for life? How can you go on living when there's pretty much no hope? This was a fascinating story, a great story. The whole trilogy, I'd recommend checking it out if you haven't already. For those of you who don't know, Mistborn follows the story of this girl who is really given this chance at a life, and she makes the most of it, although at times it's uncomfortable and painful, but she's given the chance to be someone. So yeah, those are my top 10 books of this year. Not that unique of a list. These are all pretty common books, pretty popular books. But you know, I think popular books are popular for a reason. I hope I've given you some ideas of books to try out. I feel like any of these are just great and well worth your time. Let me know down below any books that you really enjoyed this year as well. I would love to hear perhaps your top 10. But that's all for now, and I'll catch you next time.